Welcome to Spiritual United Paradox, literally language of the heart, speaker gathering. Today we have a special. We've invited Jamie L and John E. So Jamie L is based in London and John E is from Rotterdam. And they're going to be talking on the freedom from within. Jamie got free within jail and found the 12-step program within there, and John found it afterwards. So you guys have 30 minutes each, and I'll give it to Jamie. Take it away, my dear.
Okay, brilliant. Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie. I'm an addict. I'm very grateful to be here on this meeting. And I loved how you started it off with the Saint Francis prayer, because I remember a few years into my recovery, I worked with a line of that prayer every day. And it's very powerful actually. And then I worked with a line of it every day, and then I'd review it at night, and I'd look out, have I been a channel of peace today, and how did that happen? And I do some writing around it. So it just took me back to when I worked with that prayer, which is very beautiful. Um, I'm very grateful to be here because it was only 3 years ago I was released from prison, which I served nearly 17 and a half years in there. And prior to that, I didn't have a clue about anything. All I knew was I used. I didn't know there was a solution. I didn't know there was meetings. I'd never heard of any such thing in my life. And it took a life sentence in prison to be introduced to the rehab within the prison, and then to be introduced to the book and getting a sponsor and doing the work. But I'll just go back a little bit. So for me, I grew into Irish Catholic family, and um a big family, but I was taken from the family when I was 2 years of age due to physical abuse, and I was put through the care system. And through the care system, there was more trauma, like sexual abuse and things like that, which I don't really have much memory about. I've just like read it on paper and stuff. And then when I was 12, I went back to live with my mum. So I've gone back to this family that I don't really know, and like it was really messy from the start. My mum was in a domestic violent relationship, and she started to get violent with me within weeks of being back there. And the escape for me, or what I thought was escape, was I started to drink. I started drinking cider with, just weekends and after school, and it wasn't like a lot, but I was doing it and I liked doing it. I couldn't tell you the first time that I drank or what it felt like, but I just remembered that I liked doing it, and it quickly progressed onto other things, cannabis. Um, and by the time I was 13, I was messing around with LSD and things like that. In between that, my mum took me to Australia, and when we got to Australia, I was 14 and she kicked me out. She kicked me out on the street, and I thought it was the best thing ever because now I can just do what I want. I thought I was an adult, and I just needed to get away from her. I wanted to get away from her. There was so much resentment. And what that did for me was, again, I was on the streets, and I started hanging about with people that was a lot older than me, and they were getting me into raves and all these things. And then I started using more drugs. I tried cocaine a couple of times, but I think I didn't really know what I was feeling because I was always high on something anyway. It was usually LSD. So whether I felt the cocaine or not, I don't know. At the age of 15, I was sent back here to the UK, and within weeks I was in hospital, and then I nearly died of alcohol poisoning. Someone told me that at this time I was drinking whiskey, and someone said to me, if you drink that through a straw, it will hit you quicker. So I went and got some straws because I wanted it to hit me quicker, and I ended up in hospital with alcohol poisoning, nearly died from it. By the age of 16, I was in a mental institution. Um, and I always share about this because I have to look at um where my thinking got me. So I went into this mental institution, and there was a guy in there that most people in there thought they were someone else. It was like an adult ward that I was on, and I was very young. So there was a guy in there, and he thought he was Elvis Presley, and he changed his name to Elvis Presley. And I thought it'd be really great to, get in a relationship with Elvis Presley. That's what I did. But when I look back on that now, I have to think, like, who was more crazy, him thinking he was Elvis, or me getting into a relationship with someone that thought they were Elvis? But there you go. And then at the age of 17, I come out of there. 17 was my first prison sentence, and I was pregnant with my son. And even on that sentence, I remember, like, I was smoking cannabis a lot. There was always something, but mainly cannabis at that point. I come out of prison, and my intentions were to be a good mom, to stop all this drinking and taking drugs, and I was just gonna be a good mom and smoke weed. Um, it didn't last for long. I started selling Class A's, and that's when it just got crazy. And then I started using crack cocaine and heroin, and um, I ended up giving my son to my nan to look after, because I thought that if I move away, like, I could sort this all out, and it never happened. And that took me through so many geographicals, in and out of prison. I went to a detox clinic where I paid some money to go in there, and they give you an injection and put you to sleep. It's for 5 days. I managed to get into a relationship while I was in this detox, and I don't know how that happened, because I was asleep for 3 of it. And I come out of there, and I went straight and used. So I didn't know that I was powerless over this thing. I didn't know any of this stuff. And then in 2005, sadly, I ended up getting into an argument with a drug dealer, and I took his life, and quite rightly, I got a life sentence in prison. And for the first 3 years of that sentence, I was still using. Like, I was still so detached, even from the fact that what I'd done and all this stuff that that I'd put people through my using. I was still so detached from it. I never thought anything about it, and it wasn't actually until 5 years later that everything started to to hit me, and I'd get emotional about it. And so for me, I just remember that the worstest days were the days that I didn't have anything to use. That's that pain, and that wanting to die. It was awful. I couldn't use, and I couldn't not use, and I just didn't know where to go with this. The prison that I was in at the time, every time I went to see a drug worker, I was high, and I'd say I'm high, and in the end, they wouldn't work with me. And then someone told me about the 12-step program in another prison. So I put my name down for this 12-step program, and I went there. And there was a girl on there that had finished the fight, because it only went to 5 steps, and she'd finished. And she was someone that I knew from my childhood, and we used to use together. And that's what I think if she wasn't there at the time, I just would have thought everyone's lying, you're all using, and my head would have told me all this stuff. But this was someone that I knew, and I knew there was something very different. So something was going on this program. So I went through this treatment the best way that I could. And it's all watered down, these treatment centres, but it definitely served a purpose for me. It 100% served a purpose for me. I just didn't have a clue about anything. I didn't know. They asked me how I feel, and I just didn't know what they meant. And they gave me a sheet with faces on there, with feelings next to it, and I'd carry it around, and I pull it out, and I said, "This is how I feel," because I just didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue about anything. I do all this writing about consequences, but I didn't see them as consequences. So I was very detached. And anyway, I did the best that I could, and I come from then, and then I relapsed. and I said I need to go back on that program because something worked on there, and I did get 6 months clean, and I'd never got a day clean before that, unless um I had, like when I was locked up in police stations and things like this. Um, so I went back on there and I did the whole thing again. Um, and when I finished it, I knew, okay, I've got to step 5. There's more steps, and if I don't do the rest of these steps, in my head, I thought I'm gonna die if I don't get a sponsor. I have to go through this program. Um, and I got a sponsor, and she was in Bournemouth at the time, so I used to call her, and she took me through the steps. And so the biggest thing for me was then learning about step 1 and what that actually meant, because I just did, I didn't understand. And people growing up, like, people used to say, "What's wrong with you?" And I just didn't know. I thought I was completely different to everyone. Um, but learning about step 1 and learning that, I have this allergy and I have this obsession of the mind and the spiritual malady, which I believe for me that spiritual malady was there way before I picked up anything. That's my opinion. And and then learning that, I have this allergy, and when I put something in me, I set off a phenomenon of craving that I cannot stop, and then I have this obsession of the mind that tells me I don't have this illness and I can control and use. And yeah, so when I went onto this program, I thought it was all about the drugs, and then you get to know that it's all about finding the power greater in yourself and having a spiritual experience. And I remember walking around because, like I said, when I grew up, I went to a Catholic school, and the fear of God and all of this was put into me from very young. So when they talked about a power greater than myself, I now had to get rid of all my old beliefs and just find something that I believed in, and something that would remove this obsession from me and give me the spiritual experience that I needed to live a life in recovery. And I remember walking around the prison thinking and questioning myself, what's my higher power? What can I have? What can I have as my higher power? And for me, it started off as the meetings. There was a lot of meetings within the prison, and there was power in these meetings. People were clean, and that where I'm at now and where God has took me from having a power greater than myself to be in the meetings, it then went to take me through every single religion there ever was in the prison to study. And that's what I did. I become a Christian, I become a Muslim, I become a Buddha, I started studying Christian Science, and it took a few years for each of these. I was just seeking God, seeking God. But in between that time, I did have I was sponsoring in the prison. I started sponsoring because they had this treatment center, and then people were leaving the treatment center not getting sponsors or not knowing how to get a sponsor and relapsing. So I started sponsoring. Once I got through the 12 steps with my sponsor, I started sponsoring and did sponsoring. So there was a good little thing going on in there. We used to do a big book study, and 5 years in, I had a relapse, and I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? Like, how did I get so disconnected? I'd moved to another prison, and it was just chaos. And I called my sponsor, and all she said to me was like, you took back your power and seek God, seek God. And that's what I got. So I was in this relapse for 3 months, um and then I got clean, and I'll be 11 years in April. But for me, that seeking God, that's the thing that I just had to go in on for me personally. The meditation, the prayer life, and I couldn't keep things stagnant. Like, I have to change things up. So if I'm working with gratitude, I'll change up. It started for me like writing 10 things down a day that I was grateful for, and then it got a bit stagnant, so I had to change it up. So I got some books sent in on gratitude and exercises and changed my prayer life. Oh my God, I've had so many different experiences being alone in a cell. Um, for me, I was free in there. I was freedom come from within. It didn't matter that I had these bars around me, and I was in this prison. Like, I was free for the first time in my life. I felt so free within the prison. Um, and that's what God did for me, you know. And yeah, like, it's just so powerful. And I was reading something the other day where it says about, you know, the tongue. Our tongue is a spiritual instrument, you know. And and when I look at the fellowship, and that's what we do. We talk, and we get each other well. It's so beautiful. And so I come up for parole in 2014. So I could have got parole for like an open prison where I could go out daily, and they knocked me back. They refused me it, and they said I was not back for 3 years. So I had to serve the 17 years and then sit parole again. And I got so resentful at that time. Um, I remember thinking, well, what is there? What else is there for me to do? I couldn't see the bigger picture at that time. And what that did for me was it took me deeper into prayer. You know, I had to do some inventory around that stuff, um, look at my part in all of that. And then what's God's will? What was God's will for me in that? And you know what? It's so beautiful because that then opened up for me a different kind of relationship with this power greater than myself. I started studying quantum physics and reading all these stuff about the subconscious mind, and it took me down different meditations and things like that. And then when I got to the 17 year, well, I got 17 and a half years, it was time for me to sit parole again. And they weren't recommending it. They wanted me then to go to another prison and do the open part. And in my head, I just knew I was going to get released. And I wanted to come to a recovery housing, and that's where I am right now, sat in a recovery housing in my room, which I'm so grateful for. Um, I got someone to print me off a picture of this house, and I stuck it up on my wall. And every day I would visualize myself, and I'd thank God for bringing me to this house, even though it hadn't happened yet. And when I sat parole, they granted it, and they let me come here, and I've been here since then. Um, I go to meetings. I've been to, well, what's that country called? I was going to say Belgium, Bosnia. Bosnia was my first flight out of this country since being out, and it was to a pilgrimage, which was very beautiful. Um, Again, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I'm open minded to everything. I can go in a mosque. I can go in a church. I can go on a Catholic pilgrimage. It doesn't matter. It's all good for me. And yeah, and the most beautiful part about that was at the back of the church in the evenings, there was hundreds of people there from all over the world, and they'd play some music, and then it just went silent, and there was just silence. And I looked around, and there was mountains behind us, and there's just silence, you know. And everyone's there, either praying, meditating, seeking God, worshiping God, and it was just so beautiful that I got to experience that. I'm so grateful. Um, Being in recovery as also that my son that I gave to my family to look after when he was 2. I've made amends with him. He's been in a mental institution from the age of 17, but I've been able to amend that relationship. We message each other every day. He tells me he loves me, um, and it's so beautiful. Um, you know, and I've made amends where possible and where I can. Um, and this stuff is just so beautiful. And at the moment, I've just got my step 4 there. I'm just doing another bit of inventory, and I'm going in. Like, I listened to a Mark H share on around the step 4 and 5, and I'm just going in a bit deeper with that and really looking at, okay, what part of self was affected and why is it affected? Why is my self-esteem being affected? Why is my pocketbook? And I'm going in with that stuff. So I'm changing it up, going a bit deeper. Um, And you know what? I'm just so grateful. That's all I can say is I'm just so grateful for the fellowship and for the steps and what it's done for me. And you know, every morning I wake up and I do my step 11. You know, I go into prayer and I go into meditation. I'm always saying Thy will be done as many times as I need to throughout the day. Pause when agitated. Um, do some inventory when it comes up, and just maintaining that. And I think there's so many words in that big book, and for me personally, every time I read it, it's like something else stands out for me. I read it differently to what I did a few months ago. So I always like to keep going over stuff and looking at words. I like to work with words because it just opens up doors, you know. I'm just so grateful that that obsession was lifted from me. And I've been through struggles in recovery, and I can honestly say that the first thought is never to use. It's always to turn to a power greater than myself, or to talk to someone about that, or my sponsor. But it's usually I take it to prayer. I take it to prayer. And I can see on the clock I've still got 10 minutes, and I don't know where to go with this 10 minutes. But, yeah, there's just so much in it. I really don't know what else to say about. I think that's all I've got to say, really. I hope that that's helped someone.
There you come, brother.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Fantastic. See all these hearts. I love it. And I love you. My name is John, and I'm a grateful addict. And Joey, thanks for the invitation and service crew. Thanks for all the service you're doing here in this fantastic meeting. And thanks to all the people showing up. I'm always a bit blown away by Jamie. I met her first time in London, and then I heard her share, and then I got her share back on my phone from a mutual friend, and I was listening back in the car in Holland. It just made me cry. But okay. I just had a little meditation, a little prayer for the meeting, and I just I'm very curious what I'm about to say, what God brought to my heart today. I just know that I love the effect produced by alcohol. I love the effect produced by cocaine. I love the effect produced by Xanax. And I'm willing to give up everything for this effect. In hindsight, I give up the relationship with my kids. I give up relationship with my partners. I give up friendships. I give up my dignity. I give up my health just for this effect. And like Jamie also put it, you know, the spiritual malady was upon me before I started drinking or using. As a young boy, I was always trying to be a tough guy, and picking up fights with guys that are bigger than me just to show that I wasn't scared, although I was very, very scared from the inside. But nobody knew, nobody had to know, and I didn't even know myself. But being so scared, you know, I was always looking under my bed if there was nobody there. I wet my bed until I was 13. I had panic attacks, I know now, when I was a child. I always had trouble breathing, and they took me to the hospital and checked my lungs to see if I had asthma, but I didn't have any asthma. I was just so scared. And when I was 13, I started drinking. Well, I remember when I was younger than 13, when I was a little boy, we in our house, we always had with Christmas fruit punch. And then I was always allowed to get one glass. And I remember this feeling, this fuzzy feeling that came in my mouth and the tinkling. And I was always stealing a little bit more. But I started consciously drinking when I was 13. And from the get-go, I had this allergic reaction. When I take one, I cannot stop. And that's always been on me. And it doesn't matter what I take. If I take alcohol, I take cocaine. If I just take one, it takes me, and I cannot stop. I have to be stopped. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit because I prefer to talk about my recovery and a little bit H&I. I started ruining lives at a very young age. When I was 19 or 20, I already had my first divorce. I already had a kid, and I had a son. And when I made my amends to my first ex-wife, she told me that I really ruined her life. We were only 2.5 years together, but I really ruined her life. I was cheating. I verbally abused her, even one time physically, and I didn't want to do that. All these things, and then comes the guilt and the shame, and the guilt and the shame goes away if I drink. After this divorce, my father also died. And I just couldn't handle these emotions of a divorce and my father dying. And I was sitting in a one-studio apartment. And I just, all my dreams were gone, all the hopes and dreams that I had. I was going to make it in the world. I was going to be, an entrepreneur and I was going to have a family. And I was sitting home alone, just drinking and drinking and drinking my days away. And then I met a guy who I now think was my first sponsor in life, not in the fellowship, but he had something that I wanted to have. He had money, he had prestige, he had silk shirts, he had silk socks, and he had a lot of women. And if he went to a bar, he could give everybody drinks, and he was very flashy. And I thought, I want what you have. So I needed to do what he did. And he taught me all the ropes of being a criminal. And I'm not going to go too deep in my criminality, but the first thing I did was an armed robbery, and I got a lot of money out of that. And this money, make me feel good inside. And if you cannot relate to being a criminal, I didn't become a criminal because of alcohol, but I became a criminal because of my alcoholism, because I need validation from the outside and I don't feel good inside. And when I have money, I have prestige, and people like me, and I get to have beautiful women. And if people look at me, they think, hey, Johnny is so good, and blah, 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 blah. But my second crime, I wasn't a very good criminal, I think, because I got busted the second time. And luckily, in Holland, the sentences were not that hard. They gave me 2 years and had to do 1.5. And first time in prison, I was 21. I was very young, and I just the beginning was tough. I was scared in prison, but I'm a very good actor. I'm like a chameleon, so I adjust to prison life, and then I become, as I was walking this road in the criminal path, I became tougher and tougher and tougher, and I'm not saying this because I'm proud of it, not far from it, but it's just my journey. Sometimes I swam with the sharks. Usually I bite, and sometimes I got bitten. And it progressed, and also my drinking and my using. And then there's one woman in my life, is the love of my life. We got together, and then I got to prison, and we got separated, and then we got back together again, and basically I ruined her life as well. But there came a point, I've been to prison so many times that I thought, if they catch me again, they're going to give me 10 years, or they're going to put me in a mental institution. So I had to change job. I cannot do these armed robberies anymore. And then I was sitting in a bar in Rotterdam in Holland, and there came a guy from Iceland. He became my best friend, and he was doing another work. He was in international drug trade. And we were sitting in the bar, and he said, I like you. You drink like a Viking. And we became best friends. And he taught me his job, and I taught him my job, and we became, yeah, we became a power greater than myself. And today is his birthday, but 13 years ago he died of this alcoholism, of his addiction. And like I was saying, I was meditating. Oh, I don't know why I was not gonna go here, but okay. I was meditating and I was thinking about my friend, and while I was thinking of my friend, I got this fuzzy feeling like I got from this fruit punch. I was all glowy and I got a big smile on my face. I guess it was God saying, you know, it's okay, he's home. And then when I was done with my meditation and I stood up, I also missed him. So I had a really good cry. And that's also what recovery brings me, that these emotions, they can go coexist next to each other. So I'm, on the one hand, I'm happy that I'm grateful that we became such a good friends. And a few minutes later, I'm crying because I miss him. This was not before recovery. I didn't know all these emotions. I didn't have a clue. Well, okay, this is a sidestep. But with changing these careers and going a little bit deeper into criminality, I was already using a lot of violence, but it became worse and worse and worse. And I, like the big book says, the alcoholic life seems the only one normal one for me. I just didn't have any emotions with all the things that I was doing, not one at all. But this love of my life, she got pregnant unexpectedly, and she gave me an option. She said, "You're going to be a father, or you're going to be a criminal. You can't do both." I said, "Okay, I want to be a father, but I have some loose ends then to tie up." So I went to Lithuania and handed over my business there. I said, "I have to go to Iceland. I have to get some money, and I'll fix it, and I'll come back." Well, that went wrong. I got arrested in Iceland, and they gave me 6 years. Luckily, as a foreigner, you only have to do half. But I was for a long time in isolation there, and then sitting there with my head for many months without a TV, without a book, nothing. This was just complete torture. And when I came out of there, my partner, she was so depressed because of the situation. My son was born, and she was really depressed of all the things she went through. And I just kept saying, "Yeah, but what about me? For me, it's not a walk in the park." I was just thinking about me. I'm so fucking selfish. But luckily, this amends process has been working very well. I made amends to the love of my life, and we're very okay now. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit more after that. But when I came from prison in the last time, it was 2009. In total, I'd done 9.5 years inside. So I know a little bit how it is to be inside. I wanted to have a normal life, but I really didn't know how, because I just never took responsibility for my life. I now had a family. I had a son. I had a bonus daughter. I had a wife, and now I needed a job. But I got two left hands. I have no idea what to do. I'm a pretty good chef, but being a chef is maybe not the best job for an alcoholic addict. And then on hindsight, at that time I was thinking that I was very lucky to meet some people in certain times, certain places, but I ended up being a social worker. And in Holland, you have to have some papers called VOG, that you are a good boy, then you can do this work. But I managed to. I was allowed to work without this paper for the first 2 years. Then I got to have this paper, and I didn't get it. I even took it to court, but they didn't want to give this paper to me. They said it's a little bit too early. But I was going to go to any lengths to get it. So I did some other works, and after a year, I tried again, and then they gave me the permit. So I was allowed to work. But still, I was lying, I was cheating. because I didn't know how to live this family life. I just didn't have a clue. So me and my partner was separated, and I was home alone again, and it goes again. I was sliding downhill again. And to fast forward in the last week of my drinking and using, I lost everything that I cared for. My son was not allowed to see me anymore. I lost my job that I worked so hard for. My oldest son, I didn't have any contact with him for the last 18 months. And I had a new partner. She said, I will support you as a friend, but not as a partner. But still, I couldn't stop. But luckily, my ex-wife, she sent an ambulance to me. The ambulance sent me to the hospital. It was June 2020. It was a hot summer. It was the 4th time that year that I had to go to hospital. I was done. I was done. And in this hospital, I had this moment of clarity. Like, what the hell am I doing? You know, I ruined everything. They gave me some medicine to slow my heart down, to calm my nerves down, and I went home. They said, you're okay, but I was far from okay. 20 June 2020, the first day I didn't take anything. I had a delirium. The whole day I thought delirium tremens. The whole day I thought I was going to die, but I didn't. God had other plans for me. And now I get to celebrate this, the worst day of my life. I get to celebrate it every year, and I get a beautiful coin. But I didn't know what to do. You know, I went to a 12-step clinic. I didn't want to go to the 12-step clinic because my friend, my Icelandic friend who died, he sometimes went to AA, and he was always talking about God. And I think, whoa, you do your God thing, and I'll drink for the two of us. So I didn't want to go to a 12-step clinic, but thank God I ended up there. And they were lovely people, you know, they helped me a lot. But the most important thing they did for me was introduce me to you. We had to go mandatory to three meetings, one AA, one CA, one NA. And they had one speaker, every week one speaker in the clinic. So there came a guy, and I was also diagnosed with all kinds of things, ADHD, PTSD, dissociating. I didn't even know what it meant. I had to Google it. And I was like a fly. I was going all kinds of directions. But then there came a guy, and he was so calm. And I was eaten by guilt and shame and remorse of all the horrible things I did. You know, I did so many armed robberies. I had so many people at gunpoint, and I was seeing all those eyes, and all those eyes that were so afraid, and it was eating me alive. And then came a guy who was so calm that I thought, this guy must be on Xanax. But he was doing what we're doing for like 33 years at that time. So apparently that makes you very calm. And then he shared his experience, and he shared his experience, how he forgave himself, and he emphasized step 4 and step 5. And it made it so easy for me to do step 2 and 3, because I needed to go to step 4 and 5. I didn't believe anything of it, but they told me to pray. Okay, I'll pray. I don't believe in God. Doesn't matter, just pray. And I did. I want to go to step 4. And I managed to make my amends, you know. I made my amends to all my loved ones. But there was still nagging something about this criminal part. There was still nagging a little bit. And my sponsor always taught me, just keep doing what you're doing, you know. You're helping people. And all these good deeds you're doing now, there's the opposite of the bad things that you were doing back then. But I wasn't really, I felt it a bit, you know, but I wasn't completely free. And then I was 6 months clean and sober. And then somebody asked me if I could be the GSR of my home group. I said, okay, let me talk to my sponsor and I'll call you back. I said, if I don't know anything about traditions, so just do it. And if you don't know anything, just call me. Okay. So I became the GSR. And because I became the GSR, at the same time, I was asked to go share in a treatment center by a guy. He said, I like your story. So we went to a treatment center. I said, wow, this is amazing. This is fantastic. I get to do now something that the guy in the treatment center did for me, gave me hope. And I felt really good on the inside. And I went to a district meeting because I was the GSR, and there was an open position. It was H&I chair. I think this is for me. This is for me. And it was in end of 2020, begin 21. It was Corona time, so everything was closed. Everything was locked down. So there was basically nothing. There was nothing in this H&I part in this district. And then me and a friend from Belgium, we took it upon us, and we just started doing the work. And I'm not saying that I'm fantastic, but I think God thinks that what I'm doing is okay, because everywhere that I show my face, doors opening. Within a couple of months, we were going to like 10 prisons, 10 treatment centers, and I was sending people there, and I went myself there. It was just fantastic. And one example how God works, you know. I'm getting excited. If I talk about H&I get excited. But also in my work, I lost my job, but after 6 months, I was offered a job, and I was a youth worker, and I started from a youth worker. They said, do you want to work with adults, and do you want to work in the forensic part, or do you want to help criminals? I said, yeah, okay. So I started to do that, and for my work, I came to prison. And I was at my first client in prison, and I was talking to him. I had to go to this room where the lawyers are. So I was sitting in the room, and the client came in, and he looked at me with my tattoos, and I was in a training suit. And he saw my face. He's like, oh, sorry. He thought I was also a client, so he left. And a few minutes later, he came in. Oh, I have to be with you. I said, yeah. And I told him what I was doing, and I shared my experience, and I gave him a little hope. And I said, but I want to go in this prison. He said, here's the email number. Send her an email. And I was emailing the email. Nobody answers me. A week later, I came to visit him again. He said they're not answering. Here's the phone number. Call them. I called them. I said, yeah, we'll get back to you. They never do. They never did. And then I was speaking somewhere at a meeting, and I was way too early there. So I thought, okay, I'll drive, and I go to the supermarket, and I get a bottle of water. And then I came across a guy who I worked with before my recovery, and we had a talk about it. And he asked what I was doing. I told a little bit that I had a rock bottom, and then I became in recovery, and la 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 la. I said, oh, beautiful story. And I said, what are you doing? He said, yeah, I changed my job now. I work in a prison, the same prison where I couldn't get in. And he asked me, maybe you want to share your experience in prison. And now we're in that prison as well, you know. And this is just, God has a funny way of getting us in everywhere. And I did this job for 2 years. It was a 2-year commitment, but I did it 2.5 because I liked it so much. And then my home group changed. My home group was in another district, and there was H&I open, and exactly the same happened. There was like 2-3 things, and I started there, and business was booming, and it was growing and growing and growing. And after my 2 years commitment, I think he's in the meeting now as well. He took over, and it even more exploding. And now I don't have an H&I position. It doesn't feel right, but as I heard on area, the position is open. So I want to go to the next area meeting, and I'll take H&I upon me, because I really, really love the service. And for everybody who's going to treatment centers and prison to share your experience, I love you for it. I really love you for it. And my life got changed so immensely, you know. This psychic change that the big book talks about, it's just, that's upon me. I look at things differently in every aspect of my life. Last year my brother died, and at the end of the year my mother died, and in between I got a divorce, and I walked through that with dignity and grace. And today I had to make some papers for the divorce. The last conversation I had with my ex-wife was expressing gratitude to each other that our paths has crossed. No, I don't know how it is with you, but normally my relationship ends in a different way. And then today I have to fill in the paperwork. I'm not very good in paperwork, and we're talking about this, and a couple of years, I don't know, 2 years ago, I bought a car for her, and I pay this every month. And she said, yeah, we're going to do this. I said, well, I just keep paying this for you. And that's so much different, you know, that there's so much love for my ex-wife. And man, I'm so grateful for these 12 steps in recovery. And like I said, you know, the immense process with the love of my life was, my sponsor told me to keep it small when I made my first amends. And I did, but I didn't understand, because I think I need to make everything right, you know, I have to tell her everything. He said, keep it small, and I did. And later I found out why, because she was not ready to talk about all the terrible things. But I made extended amends, you know, and after 6 months, my son came to live with me. I was not allowed to see him, and after 6 months sobriety, he came to live with me with the permission of his mother. And 2 years ago, we had a very good talk, and since she was telling me what a kind of an asshole I was in our relationship in those periods, and she told me how she felt and what she was needing, and I only listened to her, and when she was done talking for like maybe 45 minutes or something, I said, I'm really sorry, and can I do anything to set it right? She said, I'm so happy you're just listening and not talking, just listening, and I see it affects you. And talking about setting things right, she said, I'm sitting in your house with our son, everything is already good. That's just a miracle one of the miracles of this program. And then my oldest son, I also made amends, and it is, you know, we have a relationship now, and he was here with Christmas. We had a beautiful time, and I'm gonna see him after the weekend. We're gonna play chess with him. There will be always a little bit that he doesn't trust me for 100%, not yet, you know. But yeah, I ruined 30 years of his life, so I cannot amend that in 5 years. But this long road of construction ahead of me, I will keep trudging this road. And you know, sometimes for me, like this recovery is this triangle. Sometimes my service, you know, it's equal sides, and my service is usually a little bit longer, and I sometimes fall short in the recovery part. You know, sometimes I slack in my nightly inventory, or I'll slack in my prayer, but I always know that if I do it too long, then I feel something creeping up. Then I just get back on it. Now, the couple of days, I don't know why, I just didn't make my nightly inventory. I do my morning prayer, and then I stop doing my nightly inventory. But I know it when I'm in the car and I'm the only one that can drive. I know it when I'm in the supermarket and the supermarket lady is talking too long with the other customers. Then I know it's time to make inventory. But I never slack in my service. You know, I love my service. Me and Joey, we're helping now Belgium, and we get to make the program. And in a couple of days, we're on fire, and the service just gives me so much fire, and I love doing this. And soon, in 3 weeks, we're gonna have a unity day with Germany, Belgium, and Holland, CA, and we're gonna get that fired up. I just love CA. Everything in my life that has any value on it, you get a stamp CA on it. So if CA ever asks me or AA asks me, I will fucking show up. I think also that's all I got. Oh, nee, I forgot one important thing. I wasn't completely, 3 minutes, okay. I wasn't completely free from this criminal part. And I went to my sponsor. I said, look, I have a good friend in Scotland, Stuart is his name, and I would like to do a round of steps on the criminal parts. Is it okay by you? He said, everything that helps you is okay. So I called Stuart, said, can you help me with this? He said, sure, I can. So 1, 2, and 3 we did on Zoom or WhatsApp, video call, whatever. And then I wrote inventory on all the criminal things, and I wrote every single crime I wrote down. Not in so many words. I wrote it down so that if you would get my paper, you wouldn't understand what the fuck it was saying, because I had to take it to Glasgow. And I went with my step 4 to Glasgow, and I met Stuart and we had a little steak in a restaurant, and then there's a beautiful, I don't know if you know Glasgow, there's a beautiful library, and we went there in the evening, and it was such a serene place, and I told him every single detail of all the heinous things that I did. And Stuart gave me the same message as my sponsor did, just because I cannot make direct amends, that it will harm others if I do so. But I got free from it now. I got totally free. I found out when I came back to Holland, and when I was walking somewhere and I knew I was doing horrible things at a certain place. I didn't have this feeling anymore inside for all this guilt and shame. Of course, I'm not happy about it, but I'm free from it. And that's all thanks to this 12-step program. And if nobody told you today they love you, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Thank you.